God had so clearly directed Faith Baptist Church to be where it is today.
I think part of what's amazing is it's a different building, different location, but there's still so much of what is the same pastor, the same secretary, so many of the same people that moved over from Wind Lake Avenue.
Shortly after the building in Oak Creek was finished, Pastor Noonan recognized the need for 2 morning services.
I remember walking into the auditorium and looking at my husband. It wasn't fully done, and I looked at him and I said, "This isn't big enough."
We definitely could use more space, but we built what we could afford. And so it was a year or so in, and we already realized that we were outgrowing the auditorium. And so we began to make plans to go to 2 services.
Right away, when we moved into this building, we started to see things that we hadn't seen before. The growth, the visitors. Because of the situation on Wind Lake, we would get a visiting family every once in a while. We'd get a visitor, and that was a big thing. That was a thrill. And we started to get visiting families, new people coming to church, not just on a regular basis, every Sunday, multiple new people, just thrilled to find a church like ours. Didn't realize there was still a church like ours.
Growth was happening again, not just with attendance, but also staff.
I was praying about my future. Do I need to go somewhere? I was offered a church, 2 different church positions, and one a pastoral position as well at a church. And I loved all of them dearly, but I just didn't feel like the Lord wanted me to leave. And so we're talking in pastor's office one day, and he's like, because of some other staff positions, he had to change around a little bit. He said, I'm looking for an assistant pastor. And he said, I'm looking for somebody like this and like this and like this and like this and like this. And as he's saying and describing this person that he's looking for, I literally I kind of like set my planner down, and I'm kind of like, I think it's funny, and I'm kind of getting angry at the same time. And I'm thinking, so he got done with his spiel, and I said, okay, so which one of those requirements don't I meet? And he kind of stopped, and he looked at me, and he's like, I never really thought about that. And so that kind of started the ball rolling for me to become his assistant, his direct assistant.
I remember going to preacher's office and just kind of basically saying, so what do you see for me moving forward? I said, I'm approaching my 40th birthday. When we moved here in October of 2010, as we were moving into 2011, preacher said at the beginning of the year that every staff member would have their own responsibility. We used to just kind of all come together at a conference table, talk about every function as a staff that was going on, and everybody put in their 2 cents on every function. The preacher transitioned to, okay, this is your function, you take it and run with it. This is your function, you take it and run with it. And the function that I ended up taking was missions. And it worked well with my schedule. It wasn't because I just had always had this deep burning desire to help with missions. It was just something that worked. At the conclusion of our first missions conference, preacher had already lined up the missionaries that were going to be there. At the conclusion of the missions conference, again, that was something that took place in January, the missions conference in March. So everything was already pretty much set. I just had to put all the pieces together for that conference. It was after that conference where I said, preacher, do you want me to be the missions conference guy or try to become more of a missions guy? At the time, our church didn't really have that. Preacher brought in Brother Dean to be the youth pastor, and right now that's about 12 years ago.
A very wise man once said that if you want to keep refreshed, hire young people, hire them out of college and train them the way you want. And these kids that my husband was now hiring came through our church. All of them did. And now he's hiring them.
The growth brought the need for more space. The school needed a gymnasium. So again, the church people prayed and gave.
Badger State Baptist School continued to grow. And then it became very clear. Well, we didn't have a gym. We we as a church, we met in a gym. That was a big problem for us because what everybody calls the sanctuary, but the auditorium was really a gym. So after church, the kids be in the back playing basketball. Hey, remember, it's an auditorium now. It's not a gymnasium. But we grew up in a gym. And then to go from a church with no gym, because we couldn't afford it at that point, our basketball teams weren't able to play, volleyball teams. We didn't really, we didn't have a sports program per se. We would rent some spots and try to practice when we can. So definitely the athletic department took quite a hit.
As we filled this building up and God blessed, we then began to make plans for our next expansion. And I think about 6 years in, we began to make those plans and meet with the architect, with the church family having grown. We had people that were carpenters and in the trades and so on, and also just a bigger workforce. And so we took on a much larger portion of the project, and we did actually all of the wood framing on that part. 2x4 by 2x4, 2x6 by 2x6. We built all the walls, actually, some of them, and they were walls that I was responsible for. We built a few of them 3 times.
With the expansion, our school has flourished. Sunday school classes grew, ministries started, and more opportunities came to care for people.
In the transition of everything, our missions began to grow.
I think one of the blessings of what God has allowed us to do here at Faith regarding our missions program is preachers' ability, preachers' desire to have that be a primary. My school teaching, some of the other things that I'm doing are more of a secondary role in me helping and building our missions program and strengthening our relationship with our missionaries. He's allowed that to be a primary focus. And there's not a lot of churches, I think, that have that.
From a small room with 13 people.
We didn't know of a name other than we got to go by faith to do this.
Through the pastoral changes.
I was so devastated. I didn't know they could leave.
This church, Faith Baptist, and its people loved my dad and didn't want him to leave.
Buildings, the hardships.
And so we had a church split.
The victories and the miracles.
By the end of the week, we need $2,500. He said to me, Pastor, the check is in the mail.
So we're going to give you $500,000. Here's the first check, and we're going to send you the rest as the project goes along.
God has led Faith Baptist Church to where it is today, and all the glory belongs to Him.